20 seconds.
Okay. All right, Joy. So one thing I want from you is from 2019, how many demos and how many apps we delivered, how many apps of requirements we have completed.
Please keep your mics on mute. Thank you.
I've told the same thing to Harish also. She tweeted. So I'm all working on certain other strategies right now. So that's why the entire Friday is. Even now I'm on.
Over to you, Paresh, sir.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with. Today we have a heavyweight panel with us. This In Conversation with seminars are a part of the CASI New York Knowledge Series. What happens is, a few years back, there was a lot of debate on the core purpose of a company, whether profits is a purpose, do we do something more than the profits, or do other stakeholders matter? And even I was a part of those debates a few years back. Today is no longer about whether we want profits or whether we have to do good. It's a given. Doing good is a given. Sustainability and CSR is a given. Every company follows SDG in one way or another. Today, the question is more, how do we break the purpose gap? How do we inculcate the CSR strategy within the core business strategy? How do we inculcate the brand strategy and the CSR strategy together? So these are the questions which companies are working on, think tanks are working on. The idea of this panel, the idea of this seminar is to come out with executable advice. And that is the reason we invite stalwarts from the industry, people who have figured out, people who are working on, people who have executed plans and businesses on CSR and sustainability, again, to reach out to executable advice. My name is Paresh. I work for CASI as a member of the board in New York. We are the world's largest platform for CSR, sustainability, and volunteering. We are present in 52 countries now. In volunteering, we have over 3 million volunteers in India alone. So now we go on to the panel. Today, we have a very, very interesting panel, as I mentioned before. We have Mr. John Abraham, IPS, Additional Director General of Police, Kerala. We have our keynote speaker, Prakash Ingole, sir, the Chief Engineer for PWD Department, Government of Maharashtra. And then we have 4 stalwarts from the CSR business, Victoria, Sandideep, Linda, and Bhuvna. So let's go on to, let's start with Prakash Ingole, sir. Prakash Ingole, sir. Are you there, sir? Is Abraham, sir, in? Mitesh?
No, he's not yet in. He's not yet in. They are trying to connect, but he's not yet in. Manoj Abraham, sir, is still not able to join us.
So
join us in a minute.
We will announce him when he joins. In the meantime, I wanted to ask Prakash Ingole, sir, a question. Ingole, sir, we would like to hear a few words from you. But before that, I have a question for you. We meet a lot of bureaucrats, we meet a lot of people from the government machinery, but there are very few people who wholeheartedly support private sector events. For instance, we have been doing the Mahavakathon for road safety. These are world-class events. 7.5 lakh people participate in that in a year. And we have received tremendous support from you and your team at PWD. This is very different for us. We work across states. So one, I would like to thank you. 2, I would like your opinion on how does it happen to you? What are your thought process, towards people, towards civic sense? Ingole, sir.
Yes, Paresh. First of all, very good evening to all the panelists. Very good evening, Paresh, Mitesh, and all those audience present here. It's a very proud privilege and an honor to be amongst the high government officials who will be joining soon and the captains of the industry. I will answer your question first, then perhaps we will talk about the subject at hand. See, it's always nice to connect with people, and it's my, I take pleasure in interacting with people like you who are basically, I basically work in the government setup. So it's not that I work only with the government officials. My job in the PWD requires me to get connected with the different sets of people, starting from the contractors who work for us, the consultants, and so many people come to us. So it's my pleasure to be among the people who do something different from what we normally do in government. So it's always a pleasure, Paresh, to be in part of what you at CASI do, different activities like the Mahawakathon and the other activities. Thank you so much for making me part of that. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you, sir. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. So, should I proceed?
Yes, sir. Please, please.
Okay. So, good evening once again to one and all. It's again, I should reiterate that it's really a privilege to be amongst you. The today's topic is basically the corporate social responsibility and the sustainability. What I feel that the corporate social responsibility and sustainability are the two sides of the same coin. Sustainability cannot be achieved without being socially responsible. CSR, as we know, it's called by different names, that the corporate conscience, the corporate citizenship, the social performance, or sustainable responsible business, or giving back to society. We also have different definitions of the CSR, but let us not dwell into those. We all know about how many definitions are there about the CSR. I being in government as a government officer, I don't have the experience of all the other panelists who basically work in the corporates. But when I look at the corporate social responsibility in corporate vis-a-vis the government, the thought that comes to my mind is the corporates are basically driven by the profits. They exist to make profit, and the government, on the other hand, is driven by the welfare of the people. The very existence of the government is like to serve the social cause. We take it as a given that it's an endure as a civil servant to inherently have socially responsible, and we are guided by the principles of the sustainability, like the economic viability, natural environment, and healthy communities. By this logic, means the government being welfare, we being the welfare state, by this logic, there should not be any sustainability framework as far as the government is concerned. I don't know how many of you will agree with me, but then again, in my discourse today, which I will be speaking in the next 5-10 minutes, I will dwell more on it. I would here like to start with my experience in 1988, that is exactly 32 years before now, that I was doing my master's in environmental engineering. And as a learning process, we were to visit a paper industry. And in that paper industry, they were showcasing us the effluent treatment plant. So we were very impressed that yes, there is such a beautiful effluent treatment plant, and we were really impressed by that. But at the end of the presentation, I just casually asked the manager who was doing the honors there, that what were you doing before this effluent treatment plant was there? So perhaps he was taken aback by my question. And later on, I realized myself that yes, for decades this industry is there, but they have been throwing their effluent, and you know how bad the paper industry effluent is. So they were throwing this effluent in the nearby river and polluting the clean water that the river carried. So my point here, what I'm trying to make is corporates are basically driven by the profits. As you all know, there is one definition by Bowen in 1953. There's businesses are responsible for their actions beyond profit and loss statements. So that was Bowen for us in 1953. When the corporates understand their corporate social responsibility, then these effluent treatment plants happen. When the corporates do the CSR, they ensure to comply the norms and standards of the ethics, the environmental protection, and the social inclusion. Standards that perhaps that protect the air, that protect the water we drink, the forest, the climate, the vulnerable sections of the society through good governance. That's very important. Good governance is very important. When I say this, immediately a thing that comes to my mind is the NPAs that are happening, the non-performing assets in the banks that are happening because of the bad governance of the corporate sector. Ultimately, who is going to bear this brunt? The common man is going to bear the brunt. The corporate have to be very responsible, and they have to have good practices of governance. They can do this through clean and green production lines. They can do this direct financial support to the non-government organizations, or they themselves can indulge in the social responsible activities like help in the medical field, healthcare, or the education. So talking about now the government part of this sustainability, does government needs to have a sustainability framework? So my answer to this question is yes. The role of the government is basically twofold. As I see that the role of the government is basically a driver of the CSR and sustainability. The second role is the creator of the infrastructure for the people. As a driver of the CSR and sustainability, traditionally the role of the government has been an enabler. It sets up the playing field for the CSR to flourish. This it does through the various declarations, signing various declarations like the United Nations declarations, or issuing some guidelines, having some incentives to the corporates through the different principles and regulations like the 2% bill, which were adopted in 2014, compacts, also various awards like the National CSR Award or the India CSR Professional Award of the Year. So many different things. As a creator of the infrastructure, the government is required to build roads, the airports, the dams, the power generation and supply infrastructure. All the infrastructure the government has to build. So when I see like the infrastructure getting built up, one of the examples that come to my mind is the Mumbai Metro. As the construction of the Mumbai Metro started, a lot of PILs happened. A lot of PILs happened because there were many trees which were to be felled. There was many structures which were to be influenced. So we get a lesson from here that whatever the infrastructure projects we as a government create, they have to be very environmentally sensitive. Another example I can cite is we are having a project like the Maharashtra State Road Development Project in Maharashtra with the assistance of the Asian Development Bank. And we are in the process of preparing detailed project reports of various roads. One of the roads in Amravati district, it is at only the DPR stage. But the people are so aware these days that immediately there are NGOs who are taking objections for the trees to be felled for widening of the road from the existing width to the 4-lane. So then again, I have one more example to cite. There is one flyover in on the national highway going from Nasik to Mumbai. That flyover is not a very big flyover in terms of its length, but it has taken more than 7 years, and only a part of it has started plying. The other side of the lanes, 3 lanes, are still to be completed. So these delayed construction and the delayed completion of the projects, they have huge social cost. I myself was a victim of this particular work where I was caught in traffic jams for more than 2 hours at number of occasions. And then, of course, when you are caught up in traffic jam for hours together, there is cost involved of the fuel you waste, the psychologically you get depressed. Then if there is, because Mumbai is a financial capital as well as the capital of medical health also, as far as the Maharashtra is concerned. So many patients do travel from the various districts like Nasik, for that example. So if a patient is coming from Nasik and he's held up for 2 hours in the traffic jam, you can just imagine the condition of the patient in the ambulance and the relatives with them. So these delays projects also have a lot of social costs. So these examples, they show us that yes, the government also needs to have a sustainability framework when it's working for its people, creating different infrastructures. So now how we need to answer these questions, how do we go forward with the CSR and sustainability? When we talk about the corporates, to my understanding, see the CSR in 3 different ways. The first way is an obligation. Obligation in the sense that there are certain laws to be followed. So the corporates are obliged to follow those laws. The second way in which the corporates look up to the CSR is like a reactive situation. When I say about the reactive situation, is like the risk management. For example, there are pollution control boards. So if you don't follow the norms of the pollution control board, you will be caught and perhaps your enterprise will have to be shut down. So that is a risk management. You have to do that. And the third is the philanthropy, like thinking beyond the profits. So that is perhaps the best way to look at the corporate social responsibility when we talk about the corporates. I can give one example how we can turn the problem into opportunity. So I can cite one example that when I was working in Nasik, there is a sugar factory which manufacturing sugar, and from the molasses that were generated, they were using it in the distillery as the raw material and preparing some liquor out of that. So the distillery waste that was being generated from the industry was being thrown on the fields, which ultimately used to spoil the soil, and ultimately the fertility of the soil was affected. Now, many a times, this distillery waste was also thrown on our roads, which were under me. So many of these roads were like the WBM roads. When I said waterborne macadam roads, they are not blacktopped with bitumen. So there's basically the stone roads with the binding material of some soil. So when they used to throw this distillery waste on those roads, the roads used to perform in a very excellent way, because this distillery waste was acting like a sealing material on the roads. So here is an opportunity that if the corporates come across such situations, so they can involve the research institutes, maybe the IITs or other research institute, and take it as an opportunity to generate or to create something better after the waste. So this is one of the ways which the corporates can adopt to address the issue of the sustainability and the corporate social responsibility. When I talk about the government, yes, we do create infrastructures. I, in particular, working in the public works department, construct many roads. We in Maharashtra have a network of 90,000 kilometers of road. And we are in the process of improving many of these roads to 2 lanes and some of them to 4 lanes also. So it is our bounden duty as a public servant that when we adopt certain technologies for the road construction, they have to be green technologies. When I talk about green technology, the immediate example that comes to my mind is using of the waste plastic in the road construction, or going for the cold mix technology in which you don't have to heat the bitumen to larger temperatures, or going for the soil stabilization techniques in which you don't have to use materials to bring the material from outside quarries. You can just stabilize the material to the required strength in situ, and then you can lay a layer of bituminous sealing material on that. So, and use of marginal materials, of course. There are certain materials which have very marginal properties, but with R&D, we can use those materials also. So by designing our roads construction activities in such a way, we can, to certain extent, fulfill the various sustainable development goals that the United Nations have adopted. I have analyzed that how many goals as a road constructor with a better design I can fulfill at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 goals. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there are 17 goals Sustainable Development UNDT has adopted. So when I analyze my project, so there are 15 goals which I can fulfill, right? From the no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure. I already talked about the new technologies, and reduce inequalities by providing better access to the underdeveloped areas. Climate action, as far as the climate change is concerned, we can provide better ways in our road projects so that the effects of the floods are mitigated and they are minimized. Only the two United Nations Sustainable Development Goals the road project cannot address because they are sector specific. They are the clean water and the clean energy, because we are not into, the PWD as such is not into that clean water and clean energy. To conclude, I would like to say that CSR has its origin in the corporate sector, where corporates are committed to honor the triple bottom line of the profit, people, and planet. But the corporates need to honor them in letter and spirit and shy away from the lip sympathy, what we say. They should shy away from that. Also, there is a growing need in the public sector and the government to re-examine the existing sustainability framework and strengthen it. Whatever we do for public good, increasingly, we should look upon our mission as public service plus plus. The first plus is for the protection of the environment, and the second plus is for the social inclusion. We should find ways as to how to go beyond the business as usual, because it's the need of the hour for our very existence as humans, as the nations, and as a planet. We need to find innovative ways to deliver our mission of sustainability so that we are able to hand over a viable future to our next generations. Finally, before I end, I would like to put a few questions for the panelists, which they can answer in their speech. The first question is, how can government promote sustainability development goals in public and private sector, both in better ways? Do you see possibilities of better ways of adopting sustainability in your sectors? And the third one is, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has depleted the government resources and also the resources of the corporations, how do we sustain the hard-won gains of sustainability? So with these words, I conclude my keynote address. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Paresh. Thank you very much, Mitesh, and thank you for patiently listening all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ingole sir. That was an amazing speech. As I mentioned, at the beginning of this program, this is a seminar of the heavyweights. So that was a heavyweight speech, and coming from the government angle, particularly from PWD, which has billions and billions as budgets per year. That would be very interesting to the panelists, to me, to Linda, to all of us. On if the government is keen to adopt the SDGs, yes, we are inching towards the SDGs. So that and some of the points you made are very nice. The role of the government and all. Yes, there are a lot of things that we can do from now. But yeah, absolutely amazing speech, sir. Thank you very much. Dr. Mitesh is
Manoj sir is still not in.
okay. So we proceed.
Yes, please.
Oh, very nice. So Inglo sir, one more thing. The name of this series in September is "What's Your Angle?" So yes, now we know your angle. So that is exactly the attempt. This is not a gyan seminar which we are having in September. And when we designed these seminars, we said, let's ask people what's your angle. It may be a personal angle, it may not complement with everybody else, it may not complement with your employer. That's okay. The entire idea is to understand people's angle, because everybody here is so experienced that you will automatically develop an angle. You will have a frame of mind that I think this should be done, or this can be like this. So the entire purpose is to get senior people in a room and get to know their angles, and it will help develop ourselves and our own plan of actions. So that was a deep angle, and yes, so that was superb. Let's start with Linda, because the PWD, the work that the PWD does is very connected to what Linda does in promoting the SDGs, especially sustainability in the core sector. Yeah. So, Linda, please tell us what's your angle, and if possible, please answer the questions by Ingole sir.
Right, unmuted. So thanks very much for having me, and for having the opportunity to give you my angle and hopefully to answer some of those questions as well. So my background is I've been a consultant for many years, helping mostly large corporates around the world, but I've also worked with government and also with smaller organizations, helping them to find their angle, if you like. So what I would really like to talk to you today, I'm not going to talk for too long, but just to give a couple of key ways that you as an organization can find your angle. And then I'd be really interested to hear some of the reflections from the other panelists who can talk about their experiences in practice. So for me, my angle is that whether it's about CSR, sustainability, depending on how you want to call it, social, environmental, the SDGs are broad, the Sustainable Development Goals. They look at many, many aspects, sustainable or social, societal, environmental, economic, infrastructure, peace, etc. And that's for a reason, because for me, I like to talk about sustainable rather than sustainability, because for me, it's about being future fit in the long term. And if you take a long-term view, then even if you are for profit, if you want to be sustaining that profit in the long term, then it's really about being sustainable. So that's my angle. And from taking that angle, I try to assist organizations in finding their angle. And I love the rule of three. So I always like to do things in threes. I've had an earlier conversation with Dr. Mitas and with Paresh talking about some of the more technical aspects, but now I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. So what are the three things? Listen, act, and listen again. So if you're an organization trying to find your angle when it comes to being sustainable, these three things. Now, what do I mean by listen? First of all, listen in the broad sense of the word. Look at what's happening in the world around you. Listen to what your stakeholders are saying. What do they expect from you as an organization? Now, often that's going to be very related to who you are as an organization in the core. So for me, being sustainable is really about, if you're a bank, find a way to be a sustainable bank. If you are in retail, find a way to be a sustainable retail company in the core and the essence of what you're doing. So if you're building roads, make sustainable roads. Listen to what your stakeholders expect, and that will help you. But listen also means, what are your competitors doing? What are they focusing on? This helps you to figure out, well, what should our priorities be as a company? What's our angle? Not only in terms of what aspects of the SDGs, what aspects do we want to focus on, but also how ambitious do we want to be? So you set priorities and set targets. That's the first listen. The second one is act. Once you've gathered this information and really listened, once you've set your priorities about what you want to do, start implementing. Now, this is the hard part, and I'm sure some of our other panelists will have a lot to say about this, because implementing, for me, means not only the philanthropic side, but really looking at what does it mean in our organization. So if we're talking about sustainable sourcing, what's happening in that contract? And do our sourcing people know what sustainability means? Do they know how to negotiate sustainable terms? And are we really making sure that that's put in the contract and being taken care of? Very simple thing, but it's about what's happening in the daily work of the people in our organization. So that's act. And then listen again. And this time, the listening is about measuring, it's about reporting, it's about communicating. It's about figuring out, we had a strategy, we implemented our strategy. Is that strategy making the impact that we want it to make? So it means tracking progress, tracking your impact, asking your stakeholders whether they're happy with what you're doing, and figuring out what you need to tweak or change in order to be where you want to be. So for me, it's these three things: listen, act, listen again, to figure out what you want to do, how to do it, and how to be ambitious. Now, these apply whether you are a government organization or a business or whatever you are, you can do these things. And I'll try very briefly to answer some of the questions that were posed. So the first one, how can the government promote the SDGs better? Well, you can see what my answer will be. It's depending on which country you are in, what kind of government you're in, local, national, etc., and what your focus is as government, there will be a very specific role that you can play. So I think there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer to that. There is one thing that I will say as an example, which I've seen happen relative to the corporate sector, is that I have seen that when it comes to companies that are for profit, sometimes they struggle when it comes to being more sustainable because of the competitive angle. Sometimes because we were looking at often systemic transformations that need people across the supply chain, that sometimes makes it hard to collaborate, and that government, through legislation, but also informally convening different parties, can play a real role in helping collaboration. So that, I think, is a really striking example that I've seen happen in practice. But again, I would say, depending on where you are as government and what your specific role is, to look in those terms. Then when it comes to COVID and sustaining the hard-won gains, well, this, I'll be honest that in March, I kind of took a very deep breath and thought, oh dear, what is all of this going to mean for sustainability? And I think we've seen a big shift. Organizations have been facing very different challenges, very large challenges, which again, I'm sure we'll hear more from the other panelists in a bit more about that. So I think what sustainability means and the role for companies is changing because the context is changing. But having said that, I think, this crisis has forced a lot of us to think creatively and think in different ways. And so there really are some great examples. If you look at, what's happening online, for example, that supply chains are changing. And because people are being pushed to reinvent, that we're seeing more and more that in that reinvention, sustainability is, often being taken into account. So I think it's too early to tell, and there certainly are negative impacts from the COVID crisis, but I see an opportunity as well to redesign the way that we do things. So I would, of course, urge all of us to take up that opportunity. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Linda. I have a question for you on sustainable sourcing. You mentioned about sustainable sourcing. Now, when we started from New York, and then we went to Europe, and then we came down to Asia and the African countries, and that is how CASI spread across 52 countries. When we talk to a foundation or a CEO in Europe, then basically our pitch, the sales pitch of why should the company do responsible sourcing, or set up a foundation or do good, is your stakeholders will like you. Simple as that. Yeah. So that is how it works in Europe. In US, the sales pitch that we use when we are trying to convince someone to do some good or set up a foundation or do an event with CASI or even study at CASI is you will create brand awareness and you will increase sales. So simple as that. In US, it's all about brand awareness and increasing sales, whereas in Europe, it's all about the stakeholders will like you, man. And yeah, the deal is done. In India, it's a mixed bag. So I'll tell you my opinion on India also. It can vary right from the promoter's wife will get to be the CEO of the foundation. That is a strong motivator. You will increase your brand, you will increase your sales. There are a number of factors in India, really, or Asian countries. Since my friend Patrick just joined, I can speak freely about China. So even in China, it is like that. It's a very complex mechanism, and you can't really force sustainable sourcing. So I just give you my background, my side of the story. I have a very simple question for you. When you're talking about sustainable sourcing, responsible sourcing, or even a simple thing like avoiding child labor, for anything that you are outsourcing to Bangladesh, there is a cost. There is a cost. How easy or difficult is it for your European companies, since you are in Netherlands? How easy or difficult is it for the companies to pick up the cost? Is it a difficult business case to sell, or is it an easy one to sell?
Well, I think maybe first of all, I think it's something like a simple thing like child labor. There's no such thing as a simple thing like child labor. I think it's a very, very complicated thing. It's one of these things that's very simple to say. And in that sense, it's an easy sell because everybody says, of course, I don't want any child labor. But when you figure out what it actually involves to try to, figure that out, and people realize the associated costs, then you do sometimes have a different discussion. But for me, I'm kind of really practical person in the sense that I think we should first start with analyzing what are the implications of what you're doing, and if there is child labor or if there is environmental damage in the supply chain, to know what's there. And then it's up to the people in the organization, who are often the corporate responsibility or sustainability managers, or it might be somebody else in the organization. These people are the real warriors and the real influencers in the organization, because then it's about figuring out what is the trigger in order to, let's say, sell this positive impact. And it could be the impact itself. Like, look, we don't want child labor. Nobody wants child labor. It could be that somebody else is more sensitive to the reputational aspect. So look, if it's found out, bad reputation, bad sales, the trigger can be different depending on which stakeholder you're talking to and how you're trying to sell it to them. And for me, the way that you talk about it should always take into account who your audience is, because you don't necessarily convince people in the same way, right? Which is exactly what your example talks about. And and sometimes you do need to do quite a bit of convincing, because sometimes the costs associated, can be quite significant. But often you can show a benefit on the other side. And sometimes it also helps to do pilots or to take small steps, which can really make that benefit visible. And that again becomes easier.
Thank you very much for that answer, Linda. We will come back to you. I have a follow-up question we will take at the end of the seminar. Okay. See, when we started CASI, one of the things we said around 10 years back is that CSR is too important to be left to CSR people. You need to have a core understanding or a basic understanding of CSR and sustainability across the company. So people need to understand, you turn off the switch when you're not in the room. That is something which everybody needs to understand. not to waste paper, child labor, sustainable sourcing, sustainable selling, ethics, corporate governance, everything, So right from the watchman to the CEO, every stakeholder needs to have a basic understanding that CSR is here to stay. It is very important. And everybody needs to have, there is a business case for everyone in the company for CSR and sustainability. So my question, let's move on to Sandeep. Sandeep, my question to you is, if CSR is too important, to be left only to CSR people, and everybody in the company, is responsible, right from the watchman to the chairman to the CEO to the consumer, even the consumers. Yeah. So you are the chief people officer for a very interesting company, one of my favorite companies. How do you ensure that people understand their job within CSR? So the sales guy's job is not only sales, it is CSR. The admin guy's job is not admin, it is also CSR. So everybody has to develop and do CSR and sustainability. So as a chief people officer, how do you work on that? What is your opinion on that?
you know, it's important to understand how one defines CSR, because the moment we box it in a definition that is mostly understood by people, I think we are defeating a purpose. And therefore, it is important to, and I quite agree with what Linda just mentioned, that it has to be closer home. I think the biggest and most important element in driving any CSR or sustainability initiative is that it has to start at home. And when I mean home, I mean a place where you stay or a place where you work. And people have to be appreciative of what CSR entails and what it means to them. And even within one organization, people can decipher different things out of CSR and do it well in their own realms. Uh, for example, if there is an HR function, I'm right now talking hardcore, corporate, where you've got multiple functions within the organization, human rights, labor, employment practices, equality, diversity, inclusion forms a critical part of CSR. When you talk of operations, environmental issues, climate change, biodiversity, sustainable resource usage is one big element of CSR. If you're talking of supply chain, having a, a sustainable logistics and supply chain is a critical element, and therefore I think it's important that the organizations understand that CSR is closer home. It's not an animal that is talked of and spoken of in terms of white papers. It is something that is practiced, and it is something that we live every single day. If I do my role well, and if I'm able to ensure great employment practices, I'm contributing to the CSR initiatives in one way or the other. So it has to be very close to people and organizations, and you have to find a relevance. I think the biggest success I've seen in CSR initiatives is when it's closer to the purpose of the organization, right? While yes, one purpose definitely for most corporate organizations is profit, and it is not sinistrous and it's not sinful. I think it's important to be able to be profitable so that you can plow back to sustainable initiatives. So I take that out of the equation. But I think what is important is that you find a purpose of your organization. If I am in a purpose of running great restaurants, if I'm in a purpose of providing delicious food, can I link my initiatives that are closer home, closer aligned to my purpose? And therefore, I pick up on hunger management. I pick up on being able to have sustainable resources in my supply chain being plowed back to the consumers. I actually reason my initiatives so that my consumers also participate. So you have to find your core purpose and link your sustainable initiatives to your core purpose. I can do that. Yeah, I cannot say that I will not go and help elderly as part of my CSR, but then I am taking an extra pain. And always when you're running businesses, your business will always have priority over these initiatives that are alien to the core of your business, and therefore find things that are core to your business but linked. And like hunger management is absolutely linked, so I've said, okay, every sale I make, I am able to partake in hunger management across the country. I'm able to say that when I actually have a store operational, I will ensure the effluent that comes out of my stores is 100% ready to be sent out. So I'm actually linking my corporate sustainability responsibility to uh, what I do. I don't have to take extra efforts to go and plant trees. I don't have to take extra efforts to provide medical help to people. I can do it, and I do it really well when I tie it to my core of the existence. And that's where the benefits start showing, and benefits start showing quick. See, it's important for people to realize the benefits of your efforts. When it's far-fetched and distant, people don't seem to. And we're in a business of agility today. It's the name of the game. If things are not agile, if results are not fast, you tend to say, okay, forget it, let's move on to something that is more meaningful. And therefore, to derive meaning out of my core establishment, I actually make sustainable living for millions across the globe. And I think that's what I would say helps organizations own up to sustainability initiatives. Paresh.
Thank you for a straight answer. Let me commend you on your thought process. We work with more than 400 companies in India alone. We collaborate with more than 400 companies in India alone on the purpose of CSR and sustainability. That's our purpose of our existence. And not many CSR heads or people heads have the clarity of thought saying, look, I will follow this because it aligns to my company. We know heads of CSRs for engineering companies for whom priority becomes a water, and they are working on water in a state where they are not even selling. So that they have nothing to do with those stakeholders, and somewhere they are missing out on a huge opportunity to brand and do good for the people, specifically for the communities that they serve. See, the last line, for the communities you serve, that is a very important line which people usually delete, and then they only stick to doing good in so many different methods. But the last line, for the communities you serve, is usually the missing piece. So thank you very much. We may have a follow-up question if we have the time. Let's move on to Victoria. I would like to know about the technologies that you're bringing from US, the colleges or the universities you are collaborating with. Where are you taking these technologies? Why not India? Why not PWD Maharashtra? A lot of questions. So please share the technologies that you're working on in the sustainability field.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paresh. Yeah, I'm very happy, to share what's my angle about this. I think that I don't know, I start my intervention saying that for me, if we act sustainably, we act responsible. I think that the practice in the infrastructure sector is very specific and is very on site. So it's a good example that how the companies and the industry in general can act with their sustainable goals and challenges. And I would like to share with you some video about the technology that I am working on for several years, and it's exactly addressing how the engineering and in the infrastructure sector is addressing corporate social responsibility and sustainability at the same time. So I think that this could help us to understand. So I will share my screen with you. So you can see now the video. Okay. You can see the video? Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. So let me put a pause in the video. More than ever.
Yeah. So this technology, as you can saw in the video, is more about how to address sustainability in projects, in infrastructure projects. Infrastructure projects are the main projects in our society. I mean, communications, transportation, water supply, power, electricity came from these larger projects. So I am trying to share with the Latin region, with Latin America and the Caribbean, this technology. I was educated and trained and certified at the MTA in New York as part of a scientist working on this technology, or how to adapt sustainable features and sustainable practices to the industry that is very high impact industry, you know that. So working with diverse scientific and specialized group in any of the dimensions that this type of construction has, like groups in engineering, civil engineering, water engineering, environmental engineering, all the groups, all the specialized groups that are involved in this type of projects on site, but also in the planning part, from the government, from the funds. So the idea of this type of framework is to integrate the sustainability in all the dimensions and all the interested parties that are participating, so all of them can apply certain sustainable features and sustainable solutions in their specific part of the or specific activities in the project. So this type of certification, I like a lot. This type of certification are, to development guide or guideline, because it's more specific, it's more site-based. So, and it's more focused in enumerate any of the impacts that are in any of the projects, and how to, and they are doing the research about how to abate or how to control any of the impacts, how to maybe, I don't know, how to compensate them. And I think that is a very good tool to control all the impacts that the project or any of the projects can have. So regarding the questions about my angle on this, I think that I think that if the project is sustainable, or if the project is addressing their goals or their challenges with responsibility, they can gain some, some level, some important level of sustainability, and be certified for this third party, independent third party, that are more from the academic part, from the research part, and they are, I don't know, like helping to increase the quality of the practice in our industry. So as I have worked for the more dirty industries in the world, I have worked in mining, in petroleum and oil, but I try to help them to be more responsible through the adaptation of this type of practices in the very specific practices that they can adopt in some part of their process in order to be more responsible. Why not? So, and regarding the government participation, I think that the government is a very important agent. It's not the only one, but it is a very important agent, because it's a planner. I mean, the government is helping society to organize and to define what's the goal of the society, what's the what are the challenges for the rest of the agents. So I think that this the participation of the government is very, very important. It's not the only one, but I think that the government have to have this very, I don't know, smart strategy, and be very specific also in what are their specific needs, depending of the country and depending of the level of government. I agree with Linda about this. And they have to define how to address these challenges, these specific challenges they have. And I think that also I think that I agree with Linda about
Victoria, last 1 minute to wrap up, please.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, the roadmap will be maybe in this process to adapt more responsible and sustainable measures or practices in our societies is listen, learn, act, verify, and certify. Because I am working on that, So I think it's very important, to learn how to do sustainability in our processes, in our specific activities, professional activities. And I will say that will be like at the central part of this, to learn how to do it in our specific.
So Victoria, your company is into EPCM, or you only do the engineering part of it and you do not do the procurement, management, and the construction part of it?
That's a good question.
You only do the engineering part of it?
No, I am not
Okay,
an
okay.
integrator. But
No, no, we will.
I am the I am like I act as a sustainability manager, sustainability director, sustainability coordinator. So
Correct.
I I know, I already know after many years of practice how to help um, any of the groups, any of the specific groups, because I have knowledge about the technologies and the equipment and the new, new methodologies that are more generally, not so
Sure.
specifically.
We
Yeah.
have a very keen in a sense of time. Let's take this offline. But we have a very keen interest in sustainability because CASI is more about sustainability, and we are working with more than 500 universities from across the world. And now we are trying to set up a superstructure university for coordinating sustainability research across the world from all the 52 countries where we are present. But my problem with certifications like that is they do not take into account the 74% embedded carbon which is already there in the procurement that you do. So you will only take into account the 26% carbon which comes while constructing something which you are constructing. But the 74% of the carbon is already embedded, which is not considered by leads or any such certification. So really what happens is it becomes green labeling. Yeah. So but the debate can go on, so let's take it offline because we are very keen to work with consultants on the sustainability aspect. So we will we'll reach out to you and let's take this forward. Bhuvna, I have a very specific question for you, and there is a reason why we asked you this in the end, because you are the chief marketing officer.
Yes.
Yeah. So sales is a priority, brand is a priority. If CSR helps you sell, superb, you sell more. If CSR helps you create a brand and which in turn helps you sell, superb, you sell more. So that's how we work, that's how I used to work. So please tell us your angle about CSR and sustainability, and then you can tell us probably in a few words about what happens at Randstad.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And what an interesting, discussion we've had, such controversial points of view and different points of view as well, right? And my job as a CMO is to find the angle, actually, right? So that's where it starts. But I think I kind of, want to go back and say that the sustainable CSR, I think, is the key word here that I'm picking up from across all the panelists, right? So that's the main thing that every organization needs to think. It's not just organizations, but also what I've found, and I've been working for about 24, 25 years in different organizations. And if sustainability is at the heart of the strategy for an organization, right, that's what has actually worked. And and I think we spoke about the positive image, you spoke about the sales angle, the consumer appeal, there is of course the talent attraction, right, and also the stronger community relation that it brings to the table, right? And of course at the bottom is where the bottom actual the bottom line is. It's not the inverse funnel that Mr. Ngole was referring to. Actually the bottom line is literally at the bottom when it comes to CSR and sustainability for any corporate. It is there, it has to be there, otherwise it doesn't make sense. But what I found is that when you bring the human side of the whole thing into the CSR and sustainability, in initiatives that a corporate run. And going back to what Sandeep was saying, you have to find, it has to be built around the organization's capabilities, right? I just want to kind of relate it to what happens in Randstad. In every Randstadian is committed, we have a goal of touching the work lives of about 500 million by 2030. So that's a clear goal that has been set, that is a clear goal that has been communicated to everybody in the organization, and that's what everybody is working for. And there is another pillar that stands here when it comes to CSR and sustainability is involving your people, right? It's not some boardroom that is taking these decisions. It's not the boardroom that is cutting the checks to the initiatives, right? If you involve the people, I have spent one month in Rwanda, just right, building a dashboard for the government of Rwanda. This was in my previous organization, of course, but we got people from across the globe to come together, and then we built this entire dashboard for the government. And similarly in Randstad, we ask our employees to actually go find a activity for their own, right, of their own. And this is what they're donating is their time, right? And they can also go, and it's not about the money alone. It is not about the environment alone. They can pick their own choice. And what I've figured out is you have to keep it interesting for employees. You have to think out of the box also, right? That's when they're attracted to the cause. That's when they're invested in the cause as well. And and when the corporate is coming in, they have to build a framework around its culture and its people, right? And the third thing that I definitely want to say is you have to make it measurable. You have to have your targets, just like you have your business targets. You have to have your CSR targets as well. What are you out there to achieve? What do you really want to go out there and do? How is it aligned to your corporate strategy? And how are you making it a lot more how are you bringing the pride factor for the employee? So those are really, I mean, this could be softer aspects, there could be hard targets that are given, like carbon emission targets, like how you were mentioning, the 74% is ignored. And so get into the real side of CSR and sustainability, and then comes the branding, the angle of taking it out there. Why not, right? You're doing something good, you have to talk about it, you have to brand it, you have to tell people what you're doing. So it's not just a business strategy, but it is a good thing that you do something good at home, you want to talk about it to your family, right? It's similar to that. You have and it also creates that what do you say an effect in the society where people look and learn also. And you're all what I want to kind of talk about here is you are kind of doing something today for the tomorrow, the next generation to look at you and also learn and imbibe. And this is not the end of the world. Yes, we are in a corona era, but we need to leave a world behind that is a much better place for our children, much better place for the next generation, which we need to look at some initiatives that the next generation of corporates can take up and run. So it is about volunteering, it is about charity, it is about leaving that positive impact on our society. That's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bhuvna, for that angle. I always believe that you should use all your activities in CSR, sustainability, employee volunteering, any good that you do, you should disseminate that information to every stakeholder. A feel-good factor always, culminates into bottom line. Yeah, the feel good factor will always culminate into a healthy bottom line, and a healthy bottom line will help you do more good. That is absolutely on the mark. I don't have any questions as such. I invite the panel to ask each other questions if they have some questions for each other. We have last 2 minutes before we sign off. So Sandhiti, Poona, Victoria, Linda, Ingole sir, do you have a question for anyone? This would be the
for Ingole sir. He was talking about what do you think of the private government partnership in these times, sir? How do you think that's going to work out? And because that's what I think, this taking care of each other between the private and government is something that I believe is that people expect in today's world and in this scenario. So what do you think are the initiatives that are happening, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, Bhuvana. These are difficult times, everyone is affected by this COVID pandemic. So addressing the situation is not only the responsibility of the government, So it's to the last person, perhaps, not only the corporate sector and the government, but perhaps to the last person that responsibility is there to tackle the situation. To individually, it's a responsibility to behave responsibly when we go into the public. So it starts from there. Talking about the on a larger scale, the cooperation between the public and the private, yes. For example, there are certain projects which are starting after a gap of say nearly 4 or 5 months now. So this is where the joining hands with the public sector that comes into action. Because when the works are starting, the people, the laborers, they are who had migrated to their places, they are starting to come back. They are starting to get their salaries. They are starting to earn their livelihood, and that is what is needed at this point of hour. That those people who are really vulnerable, they need support, and through the partnership of the government and the private sector, these issues can be addressed in a excellent and efficient manner. So I think the both of the government and the corporate have to play a role, and of course we individually have to play a very vital role in this situation of the COVID-19.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingala sir. I have an announcement. There is a very dear friend of mine who is Patrick. Patrick has been a very strong supporter. He is a European settled in China, working in oil and gas on water and related issues. So he has opted for this complex life entirely on his own. Patrick, if you have a question, it would be nice.
Well, I missed a lot of the presentations, unfortunately, due to technical issues. But I mean, there's a lot of excellent content in there. Of course, what I see as the challenge all the time is a lot of the talk about the impacts. I'm always thinking about it as working in the front line. For example, Victoria, I think, was talking about oil and gas and mining companies. Understanding even the short-term impacts, but especially long-term impacts, is very difficult. And all the uncertainty about that. And I think that's, I don't know how, if there's anyone who on the panel who has any ideas of how to manage that. I mean, the experts who are looking at the impacts and how that is related back to how you set your targets, how you do your reporting, basically everything, even certification, I would say. I never ask easy questions.
No. Okay.
Surya, do you want to go first?
You first, Linda. I think I need to take a little.
Thanks. No. Well, I will. I'll try to say something that will hopefully help a bit. I think, Patrick, you hit the nail on the head that it's very easy to talk about impacts, but it's sometimes quite hard to figure out what they really are, especially after many years, and also bearing in mind that if we wanted to do let's say a very scientific impact measurement, you can spend all of your money on that and not the money on doing the good in the first place. So it's always kind of a balancing act, and you need to be practical. So for me, it starts with the intent. The most important is the intent to do good and to try to understand what is the best option, knowing what we can know now. And that means, that's why I think Victoria and myself also spoke about learning, also some of the examples. That means that sometimes you might have to change as you go along if new information comes up, which you didn't know before. But important to be open to that and be willing to change if that's just very practically. There are ways to let's say, gather impact information in a more practical way. So what you can do is send out questionnaires with your, there are also, depending on the situation, try to embed it in your processes so that you're gathering information in your daily business. That makes it cheaper and easier to gather information. Another way to do it is to Of course, again, not perfect, but to look at scientific studies that have been done that may not be in your specific situation, but can it help you to make an assumption? Again, bearing in mind assumptions are assumptions, but these are just kind of practical ways. It's not perfect. That I think is for sure. Yeah. Victoria, now you.
Yeah, I agree with Linda about we have to be very practical, and that's why I like a lot the thing that I am doing from years ago, working with civil engineers and with engineers in general in infrastructure projects, because when you are working directly in the site, you can enumerate how many of the resources you are impacting with your practice. So that's it's very specific, and is very demanding in terms of the information that you have to gather, that you have to process. And but I think that is one of the advantages to work in this type of in this area of the practice, that is very practical, that you can see the impacts and you can work with them. So I think that the challenge for the practice on this is to have the adequate tools, the adequate platforms to, I don't know, to go ahead with the data, I don't know, management. So, but fortunately, the framework that I am working on is supported by the Harvard School of Design and Engineering, and they are working with this SOFNAS program that is a great fund that is working with development projects all the time. So we have the support of the research scientific part, but also we are working with technical teams supported by the Engineers Association of the US, the Public Work Association of the US. So we have these two parts that are not just in the scientific part and the research part, but also people that is working directly in the practice of the diverse, areas of engineering. So they are working together. They are trying to implement and to combine the insights and to have these new technologies in using just the platforms and the advantages that the technology give to us. So you can verify a project even if you are not in the site, because all the documentation process, all the verification is done by this or through this platform. So I think that this could help a lot. It's not perfect. I agree with Linda. It's not perfect, but I think it's a good intent to do it. So I don't know if Patrick is.
And I think for corporates, Patrick, it's relatively easier because most corporates that I am aware of and I have worked with have tied their CSR and sustainability initiatives to the work that revolves around them. And therefore, if I were to talk of Sapphire Foods, we've got energy saving as one of the big projects that we've undertaken. Now, it's easy for us to uh, understand the impact that we are making because we are monitoring it on a day-to-day basis at our stores. So I think when it's linked very closely to business imperatives, you're able to measure it a little more effortlessly, and therefore I think well-meaning are more impactful. So when at least I've seen, especially in HR, if I am to see, I'm able to measure very clearly how my diversity quotient has moved, how my inclusion quotient has moved over the years, how safe has, my environment practices become from the store operations level. So we have been able to monitor on an ongoing basis the impact at a micro level, at an organization level. I'm sure when you do it at a macro level, it becomes very challenging because you've got to aggregate the data and talk of carbon footprints and all that we don't have access to. But I think monitoring at our level becomes relatively easier. The impact is well measured and maintained and monitored.
Yeah, thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense.
Great.
Thank you,
I mean,
Patrick.
this-
Thank you, Victoria, Linda. Thank you, Sandeep. Do we close? It has been 90 minutes. A very well spent, exactly 90 minutes, or really 88. Yeah, so well spent 90 minutes on a Friday evening. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much, the panelists. Thank you, Ingolisa. Mitesh.
Thank you so much. No more questions, none from my side as well. And I'd like to thank each and every speaker and the guest today for joining us. Thank you so much.
Very much, Mitesh. Thank you. Paresh. Thank you,
Thanks to you, Alex. Thanks for your
Take care.
invite.
Bye-bye.
everyone. Take care.
Great.
Thank you, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye.